I'm going to teach a little bit from the Bible tonight. I hope that's okay. I'm going to start with a little confession. I'll start with a confession tonight, and the confession is I am quite a messy person, and that's just the truth of it. I like to think it's because I'm quite creative, and so creative people are often quite kind of scattered, aren't they? And different things going on. There are alternative theories about why I'm a messy person. Somebody said to me, "You are disgusting." And I got to a point. I live in a flat. I got to a point this year where I was like, do you know what? I need to turn over a new leaf. Loads of stuff had started growing under the old ones. So, and I just so I decided I've got to do something about this. So I got somebody else in, and they were quite a brutal person. And if anybody, he's Irish, just to give it away. And if he starts kind of spilling some secrets about what he found in my flat, please just remind him that he did sign a non-disclosure agreement. I'm very happy to use lawyers if I need to, and he is very prone to exaggeration. So, So just bear that in mind. But I've been kind of thinking about tidying up and getting clean and everything like this. And I was on Netflix the other week, I don't know if you've seen this. This thing flashed up on my feed. It's when you get those things where you feel like, oh, they're listening to me. And it was this show, Marie Kondo, Tidying Up. Is anybody aware of this woman? So yeah, it's quite a big thing now, isn't it? It's quite a big thing. I had absolutely no idea. Surprise, surprise. But there's this Japanese lady, Marie Kondo, and she's now got a big series on Netflix. And I kind of went down the rabbit hole a little bit. And this lady, she had a best-selling book. She sold millions of copies of her book, The Life-Changing Power of Tidying Up, I think it's called. She was actually one of Time's 100 most influential people a couple of years ago. Her name apparently in some circles has become a verb, to condo your apartment or to condo your house, is kind of to tidy up. And then she's had this smash hit series on Netflix. And I would never normally watch this kind of thing because of the tidying up thing in my life, and occasionally I just like to see how other people do life. I watched this, and basically this Japanese lady, a very petite Japanese lady, she goes into people's houses where their house, the accommodation, has got slightly out of control for whatever reason. Either they are kind of collectors and they've started collecting too much stuff, or they're about to have a baby and they want to prepare the house for a baby, or somebody's just died and having to deal with possessions. And basically every show's the same. She goes in and, oh, so nice to meet you. And it's very interesting. She goes in and she blesses the house. And they have this moment in the show where she kneels down and she blesses the house, and they play the keyboards. It's like, you've been in church, haven't you? You know what's going on. They bless the house, and then she gives them this method of tidying up, and essentially it comes down to only keep the things that spark joy. That's her kind of mantra. Only keep the things in your life spark joy. So you see people going through their clothes and like, does this spark joy for you? And they're like, oh yes, this sparks joy for me, I'll keep it. Or they're like, oh no, I haven't worn this for years, and they get rid of it. And then it comes through, and at the end it shows the house has been absolutely transformed, and the people are kind of in tears. You've changed my life, and things are never going to be the same again. And it's got that lovely kind of American nonsense about it. But that's the thing, and it kind of got me thinking, why has this touched a nerve? Why has this lady become so popular beyond kind of fantastic PR and marketing machine? Why has she touched a nerve in our culture? Why has this lady suddenly become popular? And so I've been thinking about this quite a bit. And I think in our culture, there's a sense that our possessions have in some way kind of possessed us. So there's a lot of people feel like what they have in their home or what they have in their hand, it's become unmanageable. It's become unmanageable, and this is kind of tapped into a real thing. I think there's a hunger in our culture, in our society, for a more spiritual approach to home, to money, to possessions. Kind of moved beyond the greed is good of the 1980s, or you think about the last 20 years, it's kind of been salvation by IKEA. And I think people are starting to get a bit sick of that. There's an awareness that our stuff is often a signal of what's important in our lives. And so one approach to kind of sorting out your life is to sort out your possessions. There's a big thing in the series about redemption, about transformation, about the idea that my life can be different, my home can be different, my family can be different, which she's tapping into, that hope. And then I think we love kind of having a guru who is different from us, who comes in and gives us a method and says this is the way to go, walk in it. So all these things that she taps into in terms of our culture. And then I got thinking, well, I wonder if the Bible has anything to say about this. I wonder if the New Testament or Jesus has anything to say to people who are being possessed by their possessions. I wonder if Jesus has anything to say to people who are burned out on acquisition and accumulation and getting more and more and more. I wonder if the New Testament has anything to say to those who are being mastered by money, who are hungry for a more spiritual approach. And I kind of got to the conclusion that yes, there is quite a lot that the New Testament has to say. If you've been with us in the evening services, we've been looking at the book of Acts, looking at how the early church did things. And our verse today, kind of tied in with our money theme that we've had the last couple of weeks, is Acts 2:45. It says, all the believers, talking about the new disciples of Jesus, they were together and had everything in common. They sold property and possessions to give to anyone who had need. So the early disciples of Jesus, they often sold their property and possessions, and a kind of radical deaccumulation, a radical generosity, particularly with a bent towards people who were in need, particularly with a bent towards compassion ministries. And it's kind of this radical thing that often we look at and go, oh my goodness, that's amazing, that's liberating, how could I ever live with that? And so just a couple of bits, we're going to look at this, a couple of bits to kind of just clear up. So sometimes you kind of get you might hear a teaching that the early disciples of Jesus, they stopped believing or they stopped practicing private ownership. So they stopped believing that anybody could own anything. And we see within like 2 chapters that that's not actually the case. So Peter says to a guy called Ananias in Acts chapter 6, who you'd be aware of, he kind of lied about how much he gave the church. And Peter said to him, didn't it belong to you before it was sold, the land? So he's saying, you owned it before you sold it. And after it was sold, Ananias, wasn't the money at your disposal? What made you think of doing such a thing, of lying to the church? You've not lied just to human beings, but to God. And so it's just a little snapshot that the early church, they still recognized that people owned possessions. They still recognized that people's income was their own to do with as they wished. They still recognized that people could own things. So it wasn't kind of this enforced cult-like, everybody's got to sell up before you can get in on this thing. So for those of you who are worried, I was about to ask you to sell everything and sign on the dotted line. I'm going to wait till next week before I do that, okay? But no, they believed in private ownership. They believed in that stuff. And it also wasn't kind of this weird apocalyptic cult-like thing where they were like, everybody, let's just quit our jobs because Jesus is going to come back at any moment. So let's just pray and fast and sell all we have and see what happens. Paul talks about this later in the New Testament in the book of 2 Thessalonians, and he says, look, everybody's got to work and earn their own food. If somebody's not willing to work, we don't give them bread. I mean, if somebody can't work, that's a different matter. But if you can work, you should work, and you should pay your own way. That's the New Testament take on it. So it wasn't kind of this apocalyptic cult, let's go for it. So if it wasn't those 2 things, I'm going to suggest 4 reasons, 4 things, 4 ways that the New Testament people, the New Testament church saw money, And that's why they were able to live in the way that they lived. That's why they thought that was the most appropriate thing for them to do at that time. That's why they did the things that they did. So 4 ways that the New Testament, the early church, see money. And the first one I think is the most difficult, particularly for people in our culture. So the first way they saw money was as a stewardship. As a stewardship. It says in Acts 4:32 to 37, a very similar passage to the one that we've been looking at this term. All the believers were one in heart and mind. And then here's the incredible bit. No one claimed that any of their possessions was their own. No one claimed that any of their possessions was their own, but they shared everything that they had. I think that's so challenging for people in our culture, where basically we are kind of fed a constant diet of my rights, my stuff, my things, my life. Yeah? We get this constant, it's your own thing. The New Testament, really challenging on this. The New Testament asks questions like, what do you have that you did not receive? What do you have that you did not receive? Everything's a gift. Everything's a gift. Even to something that in our culture is kind of sacred, of our own bodies. The New Testament says things like, if you're a disciple of Jesus, you're not your own. Your body is not your own. You were bought at a price. Jesus' blood, Jesus' body, we were bought. And the early believers, they saw themselves very much as not being their own, and their possessions and their money and their stuff and their very lives as not being their own. They had this idea that God was creator, that he gave life, that life was given. They had this idea that they were redeemed, that Jesus bought them, that he'd claim them as his own. And it's one of the most radical and hardcore and cutting things to 2019 people in Croydon, in our culture, is if you follow Jesus, you're not your own. You're not your own. Like, ouch. I'm going to wrestle with that one. It's really difficult, really challenging. But they had this idea that life was a gift, that everything they had was given by God. And so, in terms of money and possession, it's like, I'm just passing through. I'm just passing through. Like, God's kind of given me this stuff for the time being, but I'm open-handed with it because it's not really mine. I mean, it's kind of mine, but really it's God's. And so, okay, I've got 2 of this thing, and you've got need, so why wouldn't I share it with you? Because it's not really mine, you know? Why would I accumulate all this stuff when I follow a penniless preacher from Galilee who didn't have anywhere to lay his head? Why would I not share with you when everything that I have, my very breath, is a gift from God? It's all a gift. And this partly explains why the gospel, the good news, is specifically good news for the poor. And it explains why it's quite tough for a rich person to get into the kingdom of God. Because it's this idea of everything I have is God's. Everything is not mine. So if you're rich, you're like, oh, but I've got so much stuff that I want to keep that I don't really want to say is yours. Whereas if you've got loads of debt, you're like, yeah, Jesus, you can have my debt. You can have it because it's yours. You bought me. I'm created by you. Everything I have is yours. So it's good news to the poor. It's good news to the poor. Everything is a gift from God. And it's this idea in terms of money and possessions that it's not really mine. And so I wonder, how do you treat stuff that you're kind of loaned? How do you treat stuff that's given to you, which you know you're going to have to return? It depends, doesn't it? Depends on whether you know the person who's lent it to you or not. Yeah? So I don't have a car personally, so occasionally I'll get a car in a couple of ways. One way I get a car is that I rent from a car rental company. Okay? Now, how do I treat that car rental? Okay, like everybody else treats car rentals. I really, really hope there's not going to be a visible scratch on the car that I might have to pay for, but I really couldn't care less how well the car's looked after inside if I get it back without any judgment. Yeah? It's like, I'll blast it over those speed bumps, I'll rev that engine, I'll get where I need to go as quickly as possible, as long as there's not a scratch which the little inspector guy is going to pull me up on. Because I don't know the car rental company, they mean nothing to me. I've paid the money. Yeah? You're looking at me with such judgment. Don't think you don't do it either. I know most of you. You're all looking at me like, oh really, I'd never even thought of that. It's like, come on. Yeah? Whereas the other way that I sometimes get a car is my sister, my older sister, who I love very much, she will lend me her car. Yeah? And she's richer than I am, so she's got a nice BMW. So I'm always like, cha-ching, get in. I want to use it for the purpose that she's given it to me. I want to get it back to her in the state that she gave it to me. I want to honor her gift to me. So I use it. I don't just put it in my garage, because then she'd be like, why didn't you use it? I lent it to you for a purpose. But I want to get it back to her in the state and honor her because I love her and it's a gift. So it's like, how do you see your life? Is God the car rental company? You're like, I really hope I make the exam, but I don't actually care how it's going on the inside. Or are you like, this is a gift from someone I love. I want to use it for what they've given it to me for, and then I want to return it. It's a powerful, powerful, powerful concept if you come to the place where you say, my life isn't my own. It's a gift. I love the person that's given it to me, and I'm going to use it for the purpose that they've given it to me for, and I'm going to return it to them at the end of the day. Who really owns your stuff? So they saw money as a stewardship. It's this idea of being a steward, not an owner, but a steward. And so they saw money and possessions as part of their stewardship. Secondly, they saw money as a sign, later in the book of Acts, we have an account of the new believers in the town of Ephesus in Acts chapter 19, and many of them had been kind of into sorcery and different kinds of spirits, and they had lots of kind of magic books and I suppose tarot cards, stuff like that. And it says this: many of those who believed now came and openly confessed what they had done. A number who had practiced sorcery brought their scrolls together and burned them publicly. When they calculated the value of the scrolls, the total came to 50,000 drachmas. In this way, the word of the Lord spread widely and grew in power. And then you always go and check out, well, how much was 50,000 drachmas? And a drachma was like a day's wages. So, I don't know, 50 quid, 100 quid, 50,000. So it's like millions of pounds. So can you imagine, like in Croydon, somebody was like, okay, we're going to take over £1 million worth of stuff and we're going to torch it. Be amazing. Yeah? And it's a sign. It's a sign. An old vice president, Obama's vice president, Joe Biden, he said this, and many people have said a similar thing. He says, don't tell me what you value. Show me your budget and I'll tell you what you value. And Jesus said, where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. And so there's many, many examples in church history of people, when they encounter Jesus, they literally sell everything they have, give to the poor, and go on their way. It's what many, many people do. That's often a sign that they are given wholly to the Lord. So we see the early church already. The monastic movement, which has been throughout the centuries, has seen many, many people do this, sell all they have, take a vow of poverty, go into that. John Wimber, who started the Vineyard movement of churches, he was a very rich guy, very successful music producer with the band the Righteous Brothers. Shall I sing a bit of Righteous Brothers? No? Okay. The boss has said no. I'm so sorry. What's the hit song? Was it I love that song. No, you've lost that loving feeling, Tom. You have. Yeah, okay. You never close your eyes anymore when I kiss your lips. And there's no tenderness like before in your fingertips. You're trying hard not to show it, baby. But baby, you know it. You've lost that love. You're not going to leave me on my own, are we? Oh my gosh. So you can see how he got rich with a song like that, can't you? He got very, very rich, very, very wealthy. And when he met Jesus, he was like, I've got to give everything. I've got to give everything. So he took all his musical instruments. He took a lot of his money at the time. He sold it all and he gave it away. And that was a key moment in the start of the Vineyard movement of churches. And so that's often been what people have done. So you might be like, I've met Jesus. I want to sell everything. Great. Okay. Brilliant. Most believers, most of the people of God throughout history haven't done that. They've had the idea, they've had the belief, the knowledge that everything that I have has been given to me by God. So I'm going to use it for the kingdom. And the way that the people of God through the centuries have demonstrated that everything is God has sometimes been, in a kind of minority of cases, to actually give it all away. And at other times it's been through the tithe. They'd be like, okay, everything is yours, God. So I'm going to give you 10%, my first 10%. And that's often been how the people of God through the centuries have lived, that everything is yours, God. I'm going to give you the first 10% to show you that everything I have is yours. It's a little bit like a married couple on a regular basis having a date. Okay, it's a little bit like that. It's like, this time is specifically yours. And you're like, yeah, but all my time is yours. Yeah, all your time is mine, all my time is yours. And so we're going to kind of signify that. We're going to sign this by saying this time is specifically yours. It's yours because all of my time is yours. And you might be like, I don't like the regular giving thing. There's the danger of box ticking or legalism. But just the people of God through the centuries have thought it more dangerous. They found it more dangerous to leave it to whim, to like when I feel like it. They've thought that more dangerous for the heart than to have a regular thing. You know, when people say to me, I don't give regularly, I just give when the Holy Spirit prompts me to give, I'm always like, wow, you're brave. You're brave. Like, really? You're going to leave up to the Holy Spirit how much you give? Oh, I'd like to see your bank account. Yeah? I'm like, I'm going to stick with regular giving. I'm going to say to the Lord, month in, month out, you're the most important thing to me, and I signify it. You've got everything, but I signify it by giving the first chunk. And for me, it's kind of ridiculous, isn't it? I mean, I did this before I worked for the church, but now I work for the church. The church pays me, and then the next day a standing order goes back to the church. And it's like, that's ludicrous. It's ludicrous. I tell you, there'd only be one thing more ludicrous: to not give at all. For my heart. I need it. I need it. To say, like, you're my God. You've got all of me. And so I show you it by giving you this bit at the start, every time. And I've done this for 20 years. Don't regret it at all. Don't regret it at all. Might be what the Lord's leading you into. That's how I resist advertising, accumulation, and all the rest. It does me good. When Jesus says, where your treasure is, there your heart is also. To me, that's like an amazing invitation. Like, you can move your heart. You can move your heart simply by putting more of your treasure to where you want it to be. I really want to be more passionate about this. I really want more of my heart to go towards this. It's a simple way. Open your wallet, put some there, and you'll find your heart going where your treasure is. Because where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. So they saw money as a stewardship. They saw money as a sign. Thirdly, And the last two will be a bit quicker. Thirdly, they saw money as seed. Stewardship, sign, and seed. Don't worry, I'm not about to go full God TV on you. But there is a New Testament truth that money is like seed. You put it into something, you die to it, it dies to you, you kind of say goodbye, you can't see it anymore. You let time, you let the environment, you let the Lord do the work, and something different and something amazing comes up out of it. In 2 Corinthians, Paul puts it like this. He says, remember this, whoever sows sparingly will also reap sparingly, and whoever sows generously will also reap generously. Each of you should give what you have decided in your heart to give, not reluctantly or under compulsion, for God loves a cheerful giver. And God is able to bless you abundantly, so that in all things at all times, having all that you need, you'll abound in every good work. As it is written, they have freely scattered their gifts to the poor, their righteousness endures forever. Now he who supplies seed to the sower and bread for food will also supply and increase your store of seed and will enlarge the harvest of your righteousness. You will be enriched in every way so that you can be generous on every occasion, and through us your generosity will result in thanksgiving to God. So you sow the money, you say goodbye to it, you let time, you let the environment, you let the Lord do the work, and out comes things like thanksgiving to God, like righteousness, like new communities, like people reached, like thanksgiving, lots and lots and lots and lots of fruit as you sow it, Barnabas in the book of Acts, who we've looked at quite a bit in the evening service, he's introduced to us. He's introduced in the book of Acts in this way. It says, from time to time, those who owned land or houses sold them, brought the money from the sales and put it at the apostles' feet, and it was distributed to anyone who had need. Joseph, a Levite from Cyprus, whom the apostles called Barnabas, which means son of encouragement, sold a field he owned and brought the money and put it at the apostles' feet. Yeah? How do you get a nickname like son of encouragement? You sell your house and give the money. It's like amazing, amazing way. And he sowed it into the mission, and then that brought out churches all over the Mediterranean. And it's like he gave a house, he sowed it in, and then he went traveling with Paul. And so everywhere around the Mediterranean, he had houses open to him. He had houses open to him. He sowed it, and he saw the fruit. He sowed it, and he saw the fruit. So money is a stewardship. Money is a sign. Money is a seed. That's how they looked at it. And then finally, money is a smell. Money is a smell. Just smell the person next to you. Okay. So smell is powerful, right? Smell is powerful. And one of my favorite smells, I love the smell of popcorn at the cinema. Yeah, whenever I smell it, it like produces a breakthrough in my wallet, in my life. Yeah, I'm just drawn to be like, yes. And it's one of the only things my kids, I'm quite soft touch with my kids actually, but popcorn, it's like, yes, what's the biggest bucket you've got? 20 quid, no problem, we'll have two. It just does something to me, the smell. And there was an Italian soldier in the book of Acts in a place called Caesarea. He was named Cornelius. And it says this about him. It says, he and all his family were devout and God-fearing. He gave generously to those in need and prayed to God regularly. One day, about 3 p.m, he had a vision. He distinctly saw an angel of God who came to him and said, Cornelius. Cornelius stared at him in fear. What is it, Lord? He asked. The angel answered, your prayers and your gifts to the poor have come up like incense before God. The popcorn. It's the breakthrough. Isn't that amazing? Like the way that we pray, the way that we use our money can create a smell to the Lord. And this guy Cornelius, he was actually really the open door for the gospel to go beyond the Jews and into the world of the Gentiles, we're here tonight. Is anybody Jewish? We're here tonight because Cornelius smelled good. He smelled good in the way that he prayed and the way that he gave. Goes up like the Lord as a smell. So that's it. And that's the way that they looked at money. They saw it as a stewardship, everything from God. They saw it as a sign, one of the clearest ways you can see what's important to you, by looking at your budget. They saw it as a seed, which they'd sow and would produce an amazing amount of fruit. And they saw it as a smell that came up before God. And so at that time, they were like, yeah, we're going to sell everything. Why not? We're in. And at other times, they kind of lived a more normal life, and they were generous, and they gave, and they tithed, and they did their thing, you know? Jesus, the life of Jesus, is way, way better than Marie Kondo. Like, she's a nice lady. She'll bless your house. She's got some cool folding techniques. But your heart is for Jesus. He's the guy that when he walked the earth, like I said already, he did it as a penniless preacher. He had one cloak. One cloak. He lived the most amazing life. And then where it's going is, the book of Revelation tells us he's the Lamb on the throne. And all of the nations of the earth are going to bring their wealth to him and lay it at his feet. This is Jesus. This is Jesus who we follow. So can we stand? I'm going to pray.